For a long time, Pastor Joel Tudeman chose silence. No matter how much the rumors grew around him, he decided not to respond. His silence became heavier with each passing day, and instead of protecting him, it started creating more doubts in people's hearts. The congregation that once looked at him as a guide now looked at him with questions in their eyes. Every Sunday, when he stood at the pulpit, there was a quietness in the crowd, a silence filled with unspoken words. People whispered among themselves, but Joel never addressed it. His decision to remain quiet became like a wall between him and the community that once trusted him blindly. For many, silence is wisdom, but in Joel's case, silence was becoming his greatest enemy. As Joel remained silent, the rumors began to grow like wildfire. What started as small whispers inside the church hall soon reached the streets and even spread across social media. Some people claimed that the issue was connected to his personal life, saying he was hiding something that could ruin his image. Others believed it was about money, that church funds were not being handled in the right way. A few even went as far as suggesting that there were conflicts within the ministry, problems that Joel was trying to bury under the surface. With every passing day, the stories became bigger, twisted, and more dramatic. Those who once defended him slowly started to question if maybe the rumors had some truth in them. The trust that took years to build was now being shaken by words that had no proof but carried great weight. Social media added fuel to the fire as headlines and posts spread without mercy. People were no longer waiting for Joel's sermons. They were waiting for his confession. The silence that once gave him authority now gave people a reason to doubt him even more. The pressure on Joel was becoming unbearable. Inside his own home, his family members could see the weight he was carrying. His wife gently asked him to speak out, reminding him that silence was only making the situation worse. His children, though young, could sense that something was wrong, as their father's smile no longer reached his eyes. Friends who once stood by him now urged him to clear the air before things went too far. But the real storm was outside. Church members who had once admired him as a spiritual leader began to demand answers. Some would approach him after services, their voices filled with concern but also disappointment, asking, "Pastor, is it true?" Joel had no reply, only a forced smile that could not hide his unease. Meanwhile, the media added more weight, publishing stories without evidence, framing him as a man with something to hide. Online platforms turned the rumors into a spectacle, and people across the city were discussing Joel as if he were nothing more than a headline. Everywhere he went, eyes followed him, not with love or respect, but with suspicion. Joel felt trapped, like he was carrying a secret he could no longer hold inside. The silence that he once thought would protect him was now slowly crushing him from within. His heart knew that sooner or later he would have to face the truth, because the pressure was no longer something he could bear alone. After weeks of carrying the unbearable weight of silence, Joel reached a breaking point. Late one night, he sat alone in his study, the room dark except for a single lamp on his desk. Papers lay scattered before him, but his eyes were fixed on the Bible resting open in front of him. He read the words again and again, words about truth, confession, and the courage to face trials. His heart pounded as if it already knew what he had to do. Joel understood that his silence was no longer protecting anyone. Instead, it was destroying everything he had built over the years. The church was divided, his family was hurting, and his own spirit was restless. He realized that the time had come to make a choice. Either continue hiding and let the rumors consume him, or stand tall and face the truth, no matter how painful it might be. In that quiet moment, Joel whispered a prayer, asking God for strength to do what was right. He wiped the tears from his eyes and made his decision. The very next morning, he reached out to the church elders and informed them that he would finally address the congregation. His voice was steady, but his heart was heavy. He knew that speaking out would change everything, but he also knew that the truth was the only path left. Joel had finally chosen to break his silence. The day finally arrived. The church was fuller than ever before, but the atmosphere was different. It wasn't filled with the usual warmth and joy. Instead, it carried a heavy silence, as if everyone was holding their breath, waiting for answers. Joel walked slowly to the pulpit, his steps measured, his face pale but determined. For a moment, he stood quietly, looking at the crowd. Faces that once admired him now clouded with doubt, curiosity. When he finally spoke, his voice trembled at first, but then grew steady. He began by thanking everyone for their patience, admitting that he should have spoken much earlier. His eyes filled with emotion as he confessed how the silence had been eating him alive. I know you have questions, he said softly, and I can no longer hide behind my silence. Today, I owe you the truth. The congregation leaned in, listening closely. Some already had tears in their eyes, others folded their arms, ready to judge. Joel did not try to defend himself with excuses. Instead, he spoke with honesty, saying that some of the rumors carried pieces of truth, while others were built on lies. But more than clarifying, he wanted them to hear his heart, to know that he was human, that he had struggles, and that he had made mistakes. His words were raw, unpolished, and full of vulnerability, but that was what made them powerful. For the first time in months, Joel wasn't hiding. He was standing before his people, not as a perfect pastor, but as a broken man seeking redemption. The day finally arrived. The church was fuller than ever before, but the atmosphere was different. It wasn't filled with the usual warmth and joy. Instead, it carried a heavy silence, as if everyone was holding their breath, waiting for answers. Joel walked slowly to the pulpit, his steps measured, his face pale but determined. For a moment, he stood quietly, looking at the crowd, faces that once admired him now clouded with doubt, curiosity, and even pain. When he finally spoke, his voice trembled at first, but then grew steady. He began by thanking everyone for their patience, admitting that he should have spoken much earlier. His eyes filled with emotion as he confessed how the silence had been eating him alive. I know you have questions, he said softly, and I can no longer hide behind my silence. Today, I owe you the truth. The congregation leaned in, listening closely. Some already had tears in their eyes, others folded their arms, ready to judge. Joel did not try to defend himself with excuses. Instead, he spoke with honesty, saying that some of the rumors carried pieces of truth, while others were built on lies. But more than clarifying, he wanted them to hear his heart, to know that he was human, that he had struggles, and that he had made mistakes. His words were raw, unpolished, and full of vulnerability, but that was what made them powerful. For the first time in months, Joel wasn't hiding. He was standing before his people, not as a perfect pastor, but as a broken man seeking redemption. Kia may ab outline point 6. The confession/confirmation ka detailed script lick done. You said. Next. ChatGPT said. All right ab may outline point 6. The confession/confirmation ka detailed script lick dahun. Script point 6. The confession/confirmation. With the congregation watching closely, Joel finally opened up about the truth behind the rumors. His voice grew heavier as he confessed that some of the whispers were not just stories, they were real. He admitted that in recent years he had faced deep personal struggles he had tried to keep hidden. There were moments of weakness, times when he failed to live up to the standards he himself had preached. He admitted mistakes in how certain church matters were handled, acknowledging that not everything was as transparent as it should have been. Joel did not shy away or try to shift the blame. Instead, he took full responsibility, saying, I should have been honest from the beginning. I should have trusted you with the truth instead of letting silence create more damage. His words echoed through the sanctuary, cutting through the stillness like a sharp blade. The air was thick with emotion. Some gasped in disbelief, while others lowered their heads, tears streaming down their faces. Joel continued, I cannot erase what has been done, but I can confess it before God and before you. If my silence has hurt you, I am truly sorry. If my failures have disappointed you, I carry that burden with me. But today, I choose truth, no matter how painful it is. For the first time, the rumors no longer belonged to gossip. They had turned into a confession, a raw and unfiltered truth spoken by the man at the center of it all. And in that moment, Joel was no longer running from the shadows. He was standing in the light, even if it exposed every flaw. As Joel's words echoed through the church, the entire room seemed to shift. A heavy silence filled the air, broken only by the sound of muffled sobs. Many in the congregation were moved to tears, unable to hold back the emotions his confession had stirred. For some, it felt like a wound reopening, years of trust shaken by the reality that their leader was not as flawless as they had believed. They felt betrayed, struggling to reconcile the man they admired with the mistakes he had just admitted. Yet for others, Joel's honesty was like a breath of fresh air. Saw not just a pastor, but a human being who had chosen to face his flaws instead of hiding them. His vulnerability reminded them that everyone battles weakness, and no one is beyond redemption. The mixture of pain and relief created a powerful atmosphere, one where hearts were breaking but also beginning to heal. In the front row, an elderly woman whispered a prayer through her tears, while a young man clenched his fists, torn between anger and compassion. Families held each other tightly, unsure of what to feel. The church, once united, was now divided, yet Joel's confession had given them something they had been waiting for: the truth. And in that truth, even through the pain, there was a spark of hope that healing could begin. In the days that followed Joel's confession, the community was torn. Some people chose to stand by him, believing that his honesty was a sign of true strength. They argued that everyone makes mistakes, and that a leader willing to confess openly deserved forgiveness more than condemnation. These voices praised him for finally breaking the silence, saying his humility had given them a new reason to respect him. For them, Joel's humanity only deepened their faith, reminding them that God's grace covers even the broken. But not everyone felt the same. Others could not forget the pain of his silence, the months of rumors that damaged the church's name. They whispered among themselves that trust, once broken, could not be so easily restored. Some families quietly stopped attending services, while others voiced their doubts openly, questioning if Joel was fit to lead again. For them, the confession was not enough. It felt like too little, too late. Outside the church walls, the media turned the story into a spectacle. Headlines spread everywhere, debating whether Joel was a fallen leader or a man redeemed by truth. Neighbors and strangers discussed him in shops and on street corners, each person forming their own opinion. The reaction was a storm of mixed emotions: support, disappointment, compassion, and judgment all colliding at once. Joel's words had touched every heart differently, leaving the community at a crossroads. Would they allow forgiveness to lead them forward, or would the shadow of doubt continue to divide them? Only time would tell. After the storm of mixed reactions, Joel knew that words alone were not enough. He had to prove through his actions that he was ready to make things right. The very next week, he stood before the church once again, but this time not with a sermon, rather with a promise. He admitted that rebuilding trust would take time, and he did not expect instant forgiveness. Instead, he asked the congregation to walk with him on the journey of healing. Joel announced steps he would take to bring transparency back into the ministry. Financial matters would be handled openly, decisions would be shared with the elders, and no issue would ever again be buried in silence. He promised accountability, not just for himself, but for the entire leadership of the church. With his voice trembling, he asked not just for their patience, but for their prayers. Then, with deep humility, Joel looked into the crowd and said, "I cannot erase the pain I caused, but I can commit the rest of my life to restoring what was broken. I ask for your forgiveness, not just with words, but with actions that will prove I am still worthy of your trust." His sincerity touched many hearts. Some members who had been ready to walk away paused and reconsidered. Others, still skeptical, admitted they saw a glimmer of change in him. For the first time in months, hope flickered inside the church. It was not the end of their struggles, but it was a turning point, a step toward healing, a step toward rebuilding faith. As Joel ended his message, the church was wrapped in a silence unlike any before. This time, it wasn't the silence of doubt, but of deep reflection. His words lingered in the air, heavy yet healing. For months, the rumors had cast a shadow over his life and ministry, but by finally breaking his silence, Joel had allowed the light of truth to enter, even though it exposed every scar and weakness. With tears in his eyes, he reminded the congregation that pastors are not perfect beings, but humans who stumble and fall. Leadership, he said softly, does not mean being flawless. It means having the courage to admit when you're wrong and the strength to rise again. His voice cracked as he spoke of redemption, of faith that is tested most in times of failure, and of God's grace that never abandons those who confess with a sincere heart. Some people embraced his words with open hearts, while others still wrestled with hurt. But everyone in that room knew they had witnessed something powerful, a man choosing truth over pride, humility over silence. Joel left the pulpit not as a leader who had all the answers, but as a man who had finally laid down his burdens before God and his people.